This is weird, and I will almost definitely regret this. Hello there. I have decided to try making book type videos. I have never done this before. I am like not an avid YouTuber, so I don't know how this is gonna go, but I thought I would give it a go. Thinking about how often I just talk about books to myself, like in the shower, I thought that this might be like a better and more productive and perhaps more sociable outlet than that. So we're just gonna see how this goes, and this is how my hair is gonna look, I guess. It's a pandemic, and I'm going to share the books that I read in July, call it a July wrap-up if you will, as well as my thoughts on those books and whether or not you might want to consider reading them as well. I am joined today by Patty. She is glaring at me and is not particularly thrilled that this is happening, but she might get more excited as time goes on. So, without further ado, let's get it started. I read 7 books in July, which I am happy about. I have almost all of them here. The first book that I read in July was Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars by cheng, thom. The first thing that we need to talk about with this book is this cover, which is like possibly the most beautiful book that I own. It's a mermaid tale. There are high heels, there's lipstick, like everything about this is gorgeous. So with that aside, I really loved this book. It is a coming of age story, a young trans woman who leaves the city she grew up in, and it's sort of the story of a group of trans women, including our main character, who find their way together and basically just become badasses, for lack of a better term. They decide that they've had enough of the violence that's been impacting their communities, and they create a gang of sorts, aptly called the Lipstick Lacerators, and decide that they've had enough and they're going to take matters into their own hands. It's an awesome story. There's magic throughout it, which I love. For one, it's a book by a trans author, and read books about trans people by trans people. I think that's a very good just general thing to do, but also it challenges the trope of sort of stories about trans people that have to be sad, like trans youth who are growing up and struggling, and then as adults, and violence and all of these things, and like elements of that are in this book, but this book is really about sort of sisterhood and power. Vigilante gang of glamorous warrior femmes called the Lipstick Lacerators, whose mission is to scour the street of violent men. Like, that's badass. I don't know what else to say. That's my take on that book. It also just occurred to me that I have not been looking. Where is the camera? Okay, I should look at that. This is gonna be a trip. The next book that I read is A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. Again, really killing it with beautiful covers this month, apparently. This is a book of essays, which is not normally my thing, but I also really loved this book. This is written by an Indigenous Haudenosaunee woman, and it's sort of a memoir told through essays, everything from like how white writing and publishing is to what it's like to live for several years of your life with head lice. It is really moving. It is really difficult in some parts to read, but it's one of those books that I think, especially as settlers, it's a really good one to read. And yeah, sort of one of those memoirs that combines autobiography with education and information in a really compelling and impactful way. So I thought it was excellent. And yeah, another really great book that I would recommend that you read. The next book that I read in July was Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She wrote We Should All Be Feminists, which is probably her most famous piece. But she also writes fiction, and I think people know that, but I don't think that her fiction is known quite as well as We Should All Be Feminists, which I think is kind of a shame. It is about a teenage girl named Kambili who lives in Nigeria with her family. They are quite well off. She lives a quite sheltered and quite controlled life. Her father in particular is really controlling of her and her brother. Very, very strict household. She has the opportunity to go and visit her dad's sister at one point, Her aunt is a professor at a university and just lives a very different life with her and her kids, and sort of seeing just how stark the contrast is between Kimberly's life at home and her cousin's life at her aunt's house. And lots of things go on with the family. Again, sort of a coming of age story of a teenage girl figuring out her life with a very strict family. Thought it was really good. I really, really love her writing. It's accessible, it pulls you in. Yeah, it's quite a good twist in this book as well. It's not like a thriller, but there's like a, which I am all about. So yeah, that's that. The next book that I read is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I don't actually know how I found out about it. I think possibly Goodreads. I had to special order this from my bookstore and like wait for it to come in, and I was so excited because it had a lot of hype. And I didn't love it. And it made me very sad because I was very excited about it. This is a mystery book, a thriller, more of a mystery than a thriller, I would say. A teenage boy named Salil who is supposed to have murdered his high school girlfriend, Andy, and then killed himself. And the whole town thinks that this is what happened, and our main character, whose name I don't even remember, Pippa, decides that she's actually not sure that that's what happened. She takes on this murder for her high school capstone project. So parts of this are really cool. A lot of the book takes place like through her notes, her field notes for her project, and interviews with suspects. But I think I didn't find it quite as gripping as I wanted it to be for a mystery. The shock factor wasn't there, I guess. And it might have been because it's YA, and I was telling a friend this, and she kind of said, well, yeah, if I had read it when I was 15, it might have been a lot more like, than when you read it at the ripe old age of 24. And there was a weird element, and I saw this in other reviews, and I had the same thought while I was reading it, some weird representations of race in this book, and particularly because our main character is white, and she develops a really good friendship with Salil, who is Indian, with his brother in the book, as they sort of try to clear his brother's name together. There's some like weird undertones of white saviorism, basically, that go on in this, particularly because this girl doesn't really have any connection to the murder. I'm not gonna go on about it because it's not horrible, but it kind of is weird. So that's that on that. You might like it. I didn't. I think I gave it like 3 stars on Goodreads. It might have been more of a 2.5 if we're being honest. Next book that I read, which I will put a picture of here because I do not have it, because I loved it so much that I lent it to my mother. And that book is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is one of my favorite books of all time. And this is a book that I really, really, really wanted. Couldn't find it at any local bookstore. I don't even remember where I ended up getting it from, but like I sought this book out for a long time before I actually got my grimy little hands on it. And it was so worth it. It is a romance, which not normally my genre. A romance between the first son of the United States, Alex, and the Prince of Wales in the UK, Henry. So it is a queer romance novel, a YA novel, and there's so much about this that I love. First off, it's sort of set in the backdrop of like a fictional US political universe where Alex's mom is the first woman president of the US, which is cool. She's running for re-election, and Alex also wants to be involved in politics. So there's all this like other stuff going on in the background, which I really liked. I didn't think it took away from the book at all. I really enjoyed it. Secondly, it focuses really on those 2 main characters, but the background sort of characters, Henry's sister, Alex's best friend, Henry's best friend. I wanted to be in this book. I wanted to be hanging out with these people. I wanted to be going to the same places they were. Like, there hasn't been a book that I've read in a long time that I so badly just wanted to insert myself in the book and just chill with the characters and be their friends and live their lives. So you don't get a ton of focus on the secondary characters, but you get enough to be like, oh my God, I love you, and I want a sequel focusing on you. But the third part of the book that is probably my most favorite part of the book was this representation of bisexuality and how well and wholesome and like optimistically it does that. A lot of what's happening in this book is Alex coming to terms with the fact that he is bisexual, him sort of becoming comfortable with that label, coming out to his parents, coming out to his friends. The whole time I was kind of waiting for someone to say something to Alex like, well, if you're dating a guy, why can't you just be gay? Or like just make up your mind, or like some horrible biphobic comment. And it never really happened. Like, he just lived in this world where biphobia just seemed to not exist. And even though that's not the world, I was super here for this fake alternate universe. When I'm editing this, I'm gonna have like a heyday because this is rambly AF. The book made me laugh, the book made me cry. There were some steamy parts that I was also very down for. Also written by a queer author. Like, again, everything just lined up for me for this book. I loved it, and will immediately purchase and devour anything else that Casey McQuiston writes. So I would definitely recommend it. It is just awesome and lovely. The sixth book that I read was Accidents of Nature by Harriet McBryde Johnson. Fictional YA book about our main character Jean, who is a 17-year-old with cerebral palsy, going to a summer camp for teenagers with disabilities. It is set in the, I think in 1970, kind of a pivotal moment for the disability rights movement in the US. You see elements of that throughout this book. In particular, Jean befriends another girl named Sarah, who has these really radical ideas about disability and sort of challenges a lot of what Jean thinks about herself and her life and how she fits into life as a disabled person, or how she doesn't fit into life as a disabled person. The book was written by a disability rights activist who has since passed away. Yeah, as the inside cover says, Sarah has radical ideas about how people fit into society. She's full of rage and revolution against pitying insult and the lack of respect for people with disabilities. For a fiction book, I think it does a really good job at sort of some of that very foundational education for people who are not well versed in disability justice. I would not say I am, so there were some definitely really good things to think about in here. There are also some uncomfortable parts in this book, some super inappropriate behavior by some of the camp counselors. I wouldn't say that race is engaged with a lot in this book, and you feel that. I just had to save my book from the rain. The final, the seventh, the last book that I read this month was none other than Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. This book does look quite nice with my earrings. How did I feel about Conversations with Friends? I find it very difficult to objectively think about, review either Conversations with Friends or Normal People, just because I feel like they've been so hyped up. Everybody seems to talk about them, and I feel like it clouds my judgment, because I hear on one hand people who are like, this is the best book I've ever read, and then on the other hand people who are like, this is so overhyped, I don't get it. And I think I fall somewhere in the middle of those two things. So Conversations with Friends, very similar vibe to Normal People in terms of like the kind of melancholy, young adult, angst, sadness, centered around 4 friends, mainly one character, Frances, who along with her close friend or best friend, Bobby, they get to know this older married couple. Frances begins to have an affair with this man. Much like Normal People, not much happens, but it's really just sort of what goes on over the course of several months between these 4 people through Frances's perspective. I did like this book more than Normal People. I felt like I was able to relate to the characters in it more. It was centered mainly around women closer to my age. It was much less heterosexual than Normal People, which was cool. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed sort of the very chaotic happenings of like an early 20-something. Much like Normal People, I was not a fan of the ending. And I was not super enthralled by the relationship between Frances and Nick. I know that some people really love Nick. They think that this relationship is like really hot, really steamy, whatever. I did not feel super attached to him, or Melissa, who is his wife. Like, neither of them I felt like I got to know very well, or was particularly fond of. Not that it is a romance, but like the purported romance didn't do much for me. But again, I did generally enjoy it. It's a really quick read, and I like knowing what the kids are talking about. And that's that. Them's the books that I read in July. That was a very chaotic July book wrap up. Will I ever do this again? I don't know. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed that and didn't hate it. We're already quite far into August, so perhaps I will also do an August wrap up if this seems to have gone well. And yeah, let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, if you're adding any of them to your list based on my ramblings. We'll just see what happens. So thanks so much for watching, and have a fantastic day, weekend, week, whatever.